On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, join me as I discuss the gruesome murder of two best friends that would take nearly 4 decades to get some answers for. The Easey Street murders coming up right after this. Hello, my true crime friends. Welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. I'm your host, Belinda Brady, and welcome, guys. Welcome to this episode, which I have titled The Easey Street Murders. Now, before I get stuck into the nitty-gritty of this episode, I'll do a quick shout out to what I normally do. If you're new to this podcast, I'm pretty much an Aussie girl who loves talking about true crime. I love talking about it so much, I thought I'd jump on and do my own podcast. And here we are. So I do hope you enjoy it. And I like to think of it as I'm talking to friends about a murder case or a crime that I've just heard about. So hopefully that's how it comes across. And thank you for coming along with me on my podcast journey. I love it. Thank you. Now, real quick, where are you people listening to me from? Okay, so top 3, we've got Australia, New Zealand and the United States, but we've also got Turkey, Singapore, Germany and Finland in there as well, and that is so awesome. I absolutely love that. I love seeing where you guys are listening to me from, and it blows my mind that there is someone in Turkey listening to this podcast. If that's you, if you're listening, make yourself known. I'd love to know what you think about it. And of course, you can subscribe to my podcast. If you do, you get some bonus ghost stories. Who doesn't love a good ghost story, especially Aussie ghosts? Like they're nasty. And you can also buy me a coffee. The link, I believe, is on my Buzzsprout website. And if you do follow me on TikTok, the link is there as well. But you can also, I do believe you could just search my podcast and buy me a coffee and you should be able to find the info there. Now, what am I drinking? What am I drinking for this episode? Now, I am drinking my beloved black coffee with mocha syrup. I'm finding it really hard to find something a bit decent in the syrup world here in Australia. So yeah, mocha it is for now. I mean, I don't hate it. I love it, but I would, like to get something new. And if you do hear little noises in the background, which hopefully you can't, but if you do, it is just my puppies, my little sausage dogs in the background coming to keep me company. So they should be okay. And normally I edit out my sips. I've decided not to. If that's too gross, if you don't want to hear me sipping, just let me know and I'll happily edit them out. And of course, I do edit the whole thing. This is a one-woman podcast. I do the whole thing. And if I do think it sounds a bit too gross, I will edit them out myself. Now, this episode, warning, discusses the murder and sexual assault of 2 women. So if this is distressing to you, listener discretion is advised. And my warning, my sources for this episode is theage.com.au, skynews.com.au, abc.net.au, 9news.com.au, and some Reddit forums, believe it or not. And these have been cross-checked by me as well through several sources. So some Reddit forums, some true crime Reddit forums has been a good source for me to get some information, because I like to dive deep into the crime and the people and what happened. And this one, there was a lot of info out there, but I just wanted that little bit more. So Reddit, surprisingly, had some good links to some good articles. Now, this episode, so first, whatever you're doing, however you're listening to me, get your coffee, get your caffeine, get yourself sorted. If you're driving or sleeping or gymming or sneakingly listening to me at work, I love it. Thank you. Get yourself sorted, get yourself comfy. Let's go. Your ears are mine for the next 20 minutes or so. Now, this episode takes us to Collingwood in Victoria. And the year is 1977, and we will be following the murder of 2 girls, 2 best friends, Susan and Suzanne. 2 girls who Family and friends lovingly referred to them as the two Sues. And we will find out how this murder took nearly 40 years before a suspect, this could be the one suspect, was finally caught. So settle in, guys. Let's get stuck into it. Now, your 20s are a fun and exciting time, right? I mean, the world is quite literally your oyster. And if I could do my 20s again, I would do it in a heartbeat. And for some of us who had that foresight to go, I want to see the world and travel, that's what they did. Some of us travel the world, some of us have babies and settle down, and some of us do everything in between while we figure out what our next move is. And this was the case for the two best friends, two Sues, Suzanne Armstrong and Susan Bartlett. Now, the two girls had their whole lives ahead of them, but thanks to the actions of one man, their lives were tragically cut short. Now, Suzanne Armstrong and Susan Bartlett met at high school in Benalla, Victoria, and they became firm friends. And their friendship stretched well past the school years. Now, the two who I said previously were referred to as the two Sues travelled together, and it was during a trip to Greece that Suzanne fell pregnant to a local man that she had met while she was there. Now, she considered staying in Greece to raise her son when he was born, and she gave birth to a little boy called Gregory. But when he was 3 months old, she came back to Australia, and that's when she was reunited with her bestie, Susan. And the two girls moved in together. Now, Suzanne was a high school arts and crafts teacher at Collingwood High School, really popular, well loved among her peers and students. And Suzanne was a stay-at-home mum for Gregory and loved her little boy. She was a doting mother. She loved looking after him. And she had let a little bit of adult love into her life again, and she was dating a man named Barry Woodward. Both women were well liked. They had plenty of family and friends, and they were really happy in their living arrangements. They got on well. They both loved Suzanne's little boy, and yeah, from all reports, the girls were happy. They were happy. They were living their life, and from all reports too, Suzanne was pretty wrapped in this Barry fella that she had just started seeing. Now, in October 1976, the two Sues and baby Gregory moved into a little house in Easey Street, Collingwood, which Collingwood is a suburb in Victoria, Australia. It's not too far away from the capital city, which is Melbourne. And the home was your typical suburban terrace. It consisted of, the front door, and which led to a long corridor which had 3 bedrooms and a kitchen and bathroom down the back. And at the back of the house there was a backyard area with a side lane running down the side of the house. So you could get into the house either via the back lane or via the front. And I will try and find a layout of this house to attach to my TikTok video when this drops, but I'm sure you can Google one yourself if you're inclined. On the night of the 10th of January 1977, the girls invited Susan's brother Martin and his girlfriend over for dinner and a catch-up. Now, the four had dinner, and together they watched an episode of The Sullivans, which The Sullivans was a hugely popular drama in Australia in the 70s. I believe we could probably say it was like the Brady Bunch, but I don't think canned laughter. It was before my time. I have not watched an episode of it, but I don't believe there was canned laughter in it like you would have got with the Brady Bunch. But the popularity was up there. And at around 9 p.m, Martin and his girlfriend were ready to call it a night, and Martin took note that his little nephew Gregory was asleep in his cot and that the two Sues were still in front of the TV. He bid them both farewell and left. Now, on the following day, which was the 11th of January, Barry called the house keen to talk to Suzanne, but there was no answer. Barry didn't think too much of it. He just assumed she was out and about doing chores and getting around with Gregory, and he kept calling the house throughout the day and the night, but there was no answer. Now, Susan had also started seeing a man whose name I couldn't find, and he too had been calling the house, but with no answer. So we now have two men looking for both of these girls. Now, this man decided he was going to drop by the house to see if she was home. And when his knock on the door went unanswered, he actually climbed through her bedroom window around the side of the back of the house to gain access to the house. And he went into the lounge room to check that he had been given the right phone number and that Susan hadn't actually given him a fake number. Now, back in the day, we all had rotary phones, the ones that you dial. And many, including the ones that were in my grandmother's house, had a little card in the middle of the dial, in the middle of the numbers, that had your home's phone number on there. So I guess if you ever forgot your phone number, boom, there it is. And I still remember my home phone number from all those years ago. And I dare say it was that little index, that little tiny card with our phone number on there that tattooed it on my brain. So he checked the number and saw that it was correct. So he hadn't been given a fake number. And he just assumed that the girls were out, and he left the house. I believe he climbed back out through that window and went to join his friend who was waiting for him. Now, neighbours noted that around this time they could hear baby Gregory making noises, but didn't think too much of it. Now, on the 12th of January, which was a Wednesday, Barry was still trying to get hold of Suzanne by calling the house, and again, he was getting no answer. So this time he went with his brother to the house, and when he got there, he went through the back of the house. So he let himself in. He got as far as the kitchen table and left Suzanne a note asking her to give him a call. He didn't go towards the bedrooms as he thought that would be rude. Now, on this day, two women who lived near the girls, Ilona and Janet, found the girls' puppy. Now, the girls had a German Shepherd puppy, and they found him wandering around the street. Now, they knew it belonged to the two Sues. So they went to their house, and when their knocks went unanswered, they left a note on the door which read, "Dear Suze, we have your dog which was wandering around the street. You're obviously not home, so give us a yell and we will return it to you promptly," which is in capital letters. "Regards, Ilona, Janet." Now, on the 13th of January, which was a Thursday, no one had heard from the Sues still. And the neighbours who had their puppy were getting worried. I mean, it wasn't like them. No one had heard from them. Sue and the neighbours were getting worried. Janet and Ilona were worried. It wasn't like the girls. So they decided to go to the house and see what was going on. But unlike the day before where the house was quiet, this time they heard baby Gregory crying. But that was all they heard. But they decided they were going to let themselves into the back of the house and make sure everything was okay. So they made their way in through the back of the house, and they got past the kitchen, and that's where they saw it. In the hallway before them, in a blood-soaked hallway with blood on the walls and on the ground, was a woman's body lying on the floor. Now, these poor women, they were absolutely terrified. One of them ran to get Gregory from his room, picked him up and fled. And the woman who picked him up said that he clung to her like a little koala bear. He was terrified. And they fled. They fled to their home where they called the police. Now, Ilona later told the press The horror of that morning will haunt me for the rest of my life. When police arrived, they discovered Susan Bartlett's body lying in the front hallway next to Suzanne's bedroom. She had been stabbed 55 times and her blood had spurted all over the walls of the hallway, along with smears like she had been trying to make a run for it. She had slashes to her arms and her hands as though she had put up a fight, but she had collapsed face down near the front door and she had been stabbed over and over in the back and the legs as she tried to escape. Suzanne was discovered in her bedroom, lying on her bed. She was naked from the waist down, her dress pulled up over her shoulders. Police figured out that she had been raped after she had died, and semen was found near her body. She had been stabbed 29 times in the chest, and her bed was neatly overturned with an open book lying on it. Baby Gregory, who was 16 months old at the time that his mother and her best friend had been murdered, was severely dehydrated and had a soiled nappy, which nappy is what we call diapers here in Australia, but thankfully, he was unharmed. Suzanne Armstrong was 28 and Susan Bartlett was 27 when they were murdered. Those women would have died a horrific, brutal and terrifying death at the hands of whoever had killed them. Police discovered that the killer hadn't left immediately. He or she had washed up in the bathroom and left a blood-stained towel on the sofa and took off via the back door and the laneway. The police found Barry's note that he'd left for Susan on the kitchen table, and they determined the girls were murdered on the night of the 10th of January. So the girls would have been murdered not long after Susan's brother left after spending the night with them. Police were confident they would find their killer with forensic evidence left behind. They had footprints, they had fingerprints, they had blood, smears and spatters, and they had a towel. But we have to remember, guys, it was the 70s and the DNA forensics didn't exist like it does now then. But it would help. But that's a little later on. And when the police learned of a blood-stained shawl and face cloth that was found 2 blocks away, and then a knife believed to be the murder weapon was found near a railway station, they were hopeful. Now, the cops believed that the killer jumped on a train after he had killed the 2 Sues and fled, dumping the murder weapon as he went. It's interesting, though, when I did more research into this knife really isn't mentioned anymore. So I don't know if that was ever a smoking gun for anybody, or if it was, we found this knife, we believe it's the murder weapon, but we don't know how it was put there. Now, at the time in 1977, the Victoria Homicide Squad had only 16 detectives assigned to it, and they were all assigned to the Easey Street murders. They put together a list of 130 persons of interest, and some suspects included Gregory's biological father, but he was quickly ruled out, Suzanne's boyfriend Barry, and he was intensely interviewed, and I mean intensely. I'm thinking they were trying to do, from what I've read, where I believe the police were trying to, get some kind of confession out of him, good cop, bad cop style. He was intensely interviewed, and I mean, his footprint was left on a bed, so I understand why he was intensely interviewed. But his brother backed up his story that he was only there to see if he had been given the right phone number, and he was later fully cleared by DNA. They also suspected Susan's boyfriend, who was also in the house before the girls were discovered, but he too was cleared later on from DNA. Now, police suspected everyone and anyone involved in the girls' lives, from Sue's boyfriends to construction workers working around the area. It could have been anybody. Now, baby Gregory was adopted by Suzanne's sister Gail, and she spoke of her frustrations with the police and the investigation at the time, with her telling press that she had not been interviewed by police regarding her sister's possible killer. And at the time, she told reporters, "We weren't even interviewed. We had to make an appointment to go down to the police station to speak to police," which was really bad. Now, with no strong suspects, and despite the best efforts of police and the community, the case, as many do, quickly went cold. And at one point, they thought they had a breakthrough with a connection to another possible murder. Now, in 1975, an American tourist called Julie Gaskelley, and I hope I've said that correctly, from California, was in Australia working as a library assistant, and she was also in the Collingwood area. Now, she became friends with a man called John Grant and his friends, who were all violent criminals, and I couldn't find out if Julie was aware of the company that she was keeping. Now, on the night of her disappearance, John and his friends were in Julie's apartment, and they were all, kicking back and whatnot. And they said she left to make a phone call and she never returned. Now, the next day, Julie's sister Gail went to her sister's apartment to look for her and found her underwear thrown around the apartment, as well as a blood-stained cloth. She noticed that a knife was missing. So fast forward 3 years later, and John, who had been sleeping in the house next to the Easey Street house where the two Sues were murdered, became a suspect. I mean, he was friends with a woman who just vanished off the face of the earth, and now he's in the area where two women were brutally murdered. Why would he not be a suspect? So the police called him in, questioned him, but they were never able to link Julie's disappearance to him, and nor were they able to link the Easey Street murders to him. And in 2010, DNA would clear him of any involvement in the Easey Street murders, but it's interesting to note that he still remains a suspect in the disappearance of Julie, whose body has never been found. Now, a year went by and the murders still no closer to being solved, and a reward of 50 grand was offered, but it stayed cold. Now, the years went by and decades rolled on. And in 2011, the case was quietly reopened by renowned detective Ron Iddles. Now, for those who don't know Ron was once dubbed Australia's greatest detective, and his conviction rate was a staggering 99%. Now, Ron joined the police force in 1972, and he spent the early days of his career in the uniformed branch of Collingwood Police before moving on to homicide in 1980. He retired in 1989 and began his own trucking business, but police life called him back, and he returned in 1994, where in 3 short years he worked his way to a detective senior sergeant role in the homicide division and made his mark. In short, Ron Iddles was the man you wanted on the job. If your loved one was missing or hurt or murdered, he was the man you wanted on the case. Now, after Detective Iddles took up the case in 2017, a reward of $1 million was offered for any info leading to the arrest or the conviction of the girl's killer. Now, during this time, another detective by the name of Stuart Benson, who had been assigned to cold case review the murders between 1997 and 2001, had been chipping away at the investigation. And so this was before Ron Iddles jumped onto it. Now, during this time where Detective Benson was looking at it as a cold case review, he obtained new DNA samples from persons of interest. Now, these samples included samples from Barry Woodward, who had dated Suzanne and his brother Henry, a man called Ross Hammond, who had dated Susan as well, and John Grant, who, of course, as I said just not long ago, was the suspect in the disappearance of Julie Gaskellay, and a few of the construction workers who they were able to track down who had been near the house at the time of the murders. Now, the semen that had been left near Suzanne's body at the scene was crucial to the DNA investigation, and police had hoped they would get a match, but they didn't. One by one, these men were crossed off the list. The DNA they provided did not match the DNA of the semen sample that was left behind at the scene. And we are near the twist in this case, but we've got to go back again. We've got to go back to 1977. And in the days after the murders, police pulled over a 17-year-old boy called Perry Corumbolis, who lived near the house at the time. Now, remember, guys, police were questioning anyone who breathed near the house. But on this day, a young sergeant, a young police officer by the name of Ron Iddles, was a uniform cop, and he flagged down the 17-year-old Perry, who was driving a 1968 Holden sedan, and he pulled him over for nothing more than a random check, which they often did back in the day. Now, it turns out that Perry was a student at the school that Susan worked at and lived only a short walk from where the two girls were murdered. And when Iddles pulled him over, they had a chat, and when he looked in Perry's boot, he found a knife. And he also saw what he thought were blood stains near the knife's handle. Now, Iddles grabbed the knife and gave it to the detectives who were investigating the Easey Street murders, and that's where it stayed. So that's where when I said earlier on in this episode, they had the suspected murder weapon, and apparently Perry told Iddles that he had found this knife near a railway line, so he just picked it up. And this story was backed up by his friends when he was questioned further. We're now going back to the 2017. We're now back in 2017. Perry, still in Australia, was spoken to about the Easey Street murders, and at this stage he agreed to give a DNA sample. So this was after cold case review, after it had gone back to Ron Iddles again to look at it. And Ron decided he wanted to have a chat with Perry and he wanted some DNA off him. But then he changed his mind. After he agreed, he changed his mind, and being a dual citizen of Greece and Australia, he decided to leave Australia for Greece that same year. But in 2018, police seized a tissue sample from Perry's car and used that sample to compare to the DNA that had been found at the murder scene. Now, the DNA they had, which of course was the semen left behind, but they also had blood that had been found on a towel, and some blood that had been found on a lampshade. The results showed that the semen found at the scene and the DNA of Perry was 100 billion times more likely to observe those results if the accused was a contributor. So it was pretty promising for police and looking very bad for Perry. But Perry Corumbolis was in Greece, and when police found him there, they were frustrated to learn they could not arrest him or ask for him to be extradited because Greece has a 20-year statute of limitation on initiating murder charges. So he could stay in Greece, no problem. So the Australian police placed him on an international watch list, and in 2024 that international watch list went off and he was detained and arrested at the Leonardo da Vinci airport in Rome after he left Greece and entered Italy, which alerted authorities to him being on this wanted list, which alerted police in Australia. Now, he agreed to be extradited to Australia, and his lawyer said he was prepared to face trial here in Australia for the murders, and he planned to plead not guilty. His defense said that they planned to critique how the police managed to grab Perry's DNA from the car and how they managed and stored the DNA from the 1977 murder scene. Now, in November 2025, which was only a few months ago, Perry Korombolis was committed to stand trial in the Supreme Court, where the rape charge on Suzanne was dismissed. On the murder charges, however, the magistrate has found there was sufficient weight to commit him to stand trial before a jury. Perry, now aged 66, has pled not guilty to both counts of murder. The girls' families, the two Sue's families, have said the arrest is closure, and they are relieved about this update and have thanked police for their efforts in bringing a suspect forward. Suzanne's sister Gail said that she actually got up and did a happy dance when informed of the charges laid against Perry. As of right now, no date for this trial has been set, but it will happen. So what do you think, guys? Do you think Perry is the man? Do you think the 17-year-old boy that Ron Iddles pulled over all those years ago, days after the murder of the two Suzannes, the two Sues, do you think that was him? I guess we'll find out, won't we? And I know myself, I will be watching this trial with keen interest, as I know the two Sue's families will be watching with a keen interest. This murder happened nearly 4 decades ago. It would be fantastic to have some closure for the families of the two Sues. So let's see how this plays out. And yeah, so hopefully, and I do really sincerely hope for the families and friends of Suzanne Armstrong and Susan Bartlett. I do hope we are able to get some closure from this upcoming trial and, at last, finally lay to rest what happened with a murder that was once described as Victoria's most brutal crime. It would be really good to get some closure for these families. And that's it, guys. Another episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans done and dusted. Thank you so much for your company. If you are liking my podcast, please spread the word. Share me. You can share me on TikTok. You can share me to your friends, your family, workmates, however you like. Share away. And of course, you can send me a text. You can buy me a coffee. You can leave me a comment. I read all of them. I try and respond to them as well. I am a little bit tech unsavvy, so it does take me a while, but I will get back to you, I promise. And until next time, guys, thank you so much for your company. Stay safe, stay cool, stay caffeinated, and I will catch you all later.